So I want you to picture something for a second. You're walking through, without a doubt, one of the most brutal, just actively hostile environments on the planet, the Mojave Desert.
Oh, yeah. A completely unforgiving place.
Right. And the temperature is, hovering around maybe 100 to 20 degrees in the shade, except there isn't any shade. It's just this blinding, oppressive glare everywhere you look.
And the air is just, it's so incredibly dry, like it's pulling the moisture right out of your lungs.
Exactly. Every single breath is painful.
Mm.
And you are just miles and miles away from the nearest outpost of civilization.
Yeah.
I mean, if you scream out there, the sound just sort of dies in the heavy baking air.
Followed by the emptiness.
Yeah. So you're surrounded by nothing but this seemingly endless expanse of cracked earth and, these shifting, whispering sand dunes, just total suffocating silence.
It's pure sensory deprivation.
It really is.
Yeah.
But then you crest this shimmering ridge of sand, right? Your boots are sliding in the grit, and you see something that it completely breaks your brain, like an image straight out of a fever dream.
The kind of thing that makes you question your own sanity.
Totally. Because sticking up out of the desert floor, literally hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean, completely bleached by the sun and half buried in the sand, is the rotting wooden hull of a massive 250-foot seafaring vessel.
It's a glitch in reality. That's the only way to describe it. It's a monstrous geographical paradox.
Right.
When you encounter something that profoundly out of place, a ship trapped in a dead sea of sand, it triggers this deep primal sense of unease, It's just wrong.
Which is, I think, the perfect way to frame this, because it forces you, as the observer, into a really uncomfortable choice.
You either question the laws of nature.
Exactly. Either the world is far stranger and honestly more terrifying than you ever imagined, or you have to question the sanity of the people who claim to have seen it.
Right.
So, welcome to the deep dive. We are taking a stack of sources today, specifically a documentary transcript and several historical articles, and we're extracting the insights. And today we are exploring exactly that choice.
It's such a fascinating topic.
It really is. We are diving into one of the greatest, just most eerie legends of the American West, the lost ship of the Mojave.
And to do that, our mission today is to unpack not just the legend itself, but the sheer terrifying plausibility of it. Like, how could a maritime disaster theoretically occur in a landlocked desert?
You're right, which sounds impossible.
It does. And we're also going to dissect the incredible, harrowing, and maybe highly deceitful survival story of the man who risked absolutely everything to find it.
Yeah, his story is wild.
It is. And ultimately, we're going to try and understand what this enduring myth tells us about human obsession, like the dark places people will go when they are truly desperate.
Because the premise alone is just staggering. Finding a 17th century galleon in the Mojave is, it's like finding a Soviet submarine parked in a crater on the moon.
That's actually a great analogy.
It's an impossibility that demands an explanation. So to build that explanation, I know from looking at our sources that we have to wind the clock way back to 1847.
Yes. 1847 is where the horror really starts.
Right. We need to look at a man named Charlie Klusker, or sometimes the historical records call him Kusa or Klusker. And we have to examine this Native American oral tradition that astonishingly turned out to be way more scientifically accurate than anyone back then could have possibly realized.
Well, the context of 1847 is just crucial here, because you have to understand the sheer desperation that drives this entire narrative. It's a very dark, uncertain period in American history.
Right. The Mexican-American War is just ending.
Exactly. And Charlie Klusker has just been demobilized from the Army. So he's a veteran. He's likely carrying some heavy psychological and physical scars from that conflict. And he steps out into an economy that is just deeply unstable.
Not a great time to be looking for work.
Not at all. For a demobilized soldier with no land, no prospects, the East Coast basically holds nothing but poverty. So he decides to head west. He looks toward the new, untamed frontier of California.
Which was basically a myth in itself at that point.
Oh, it really was. For Charlie and, thousands of desperate men like him, California was this phantom promise. It was whispered about as this place of magic, immense fertility, and just completely underexploited wealth.
A total blank slate.
Right. The place where you could potentially make your fortune and rewrite your destiny, or, and this was very likely, die trying.
But, getting to that blank slate in 1847 is a horror story in its own right. Like, we take travel so for granted now, but back then, you're signing up for a grueling, life-threatening march.
Oh, absolutely.
Charlie opts for the southern overland route, which was it was the cheapest way to get to California, but the sources make it very clear that it was a terrifying journey over 2,000 miles. Takes him more than 3 months.
And just the physical deterioration you'd experience.
Yeah, I want to try and put you in his boots for a second. You are braving knee-deep freezing mud and these snowstorms that are threatening to give you frostbite, gangrene. And then finally you descend into the scorching, lethal heat of the desert.
And the environment, honestly, is only half the threat. Because he's crossing through territories that are completely outside the jurisdiction of the U.S. government. He is traveling through the heartlands of fierce Native American tribes who, frankly, have every reason to be hostile to encroaching settlers.
Oh, totally. You'd be terrified the whole time.
Charlie is literally taking his life into his hands every single day. The psychological toll of that, just the constant vigilance, the dread of a potential ambush, it must have been overwhelming.
But surprisingly, instead of a violent end, something remarkable happens.
Yes.
He encounters the Cahuilla tribe.
Yeah.
And rather than conflict, they actually share something with him, a story. This really fascinating oral history that basically it ends up hijacking Charlie's brain for the rest of his life.
It's an incredible story. The Cahuilla tell him about the landscape around them, which, to Charlie's eyes is just this endless dead desert.
Just sand and scrub.
Right. But they describe a time long ago when that vast, barren wasteland was actually submerged. They tell him it was covered by this massive stretch of water.
An ocean in a desert.
Essentially, yes. And they say that one day, a great bird with white wings came floating down from the sky onto this water. It stopped there. And then slowly, the water vanished.
Wow.
And the bird was left lying in the sands. It died, and its white wings fell down, leaving only a tall, bare tree sticking up out of the earth. And over time, the desert winds blew, the dunes shifted, and the bird was just buried in the sand.
I mean, it is a beautiful, deeply haunting piece of oral history, like a mythological recounting of a localized apocalypse.
It really is.
But Charlie hears this story, and his brain does something just completely unhinged.
Oh, completely.
He strips away all the mythology. He just assumes this great bird is a literal physical sailing ship. The white wings are canvas sails, and the tall bare tree is a wooden mast.
He takes it completely literally.
Right. He bridges a Native American myth with European maritime engineering just because he is a desperate prospector looking for something of value.
He hears white wings and thinks, treasure?
Yeah, and I have to challenge this logic because why on earth would a 19th century prospector standing in a bone-dry desert hundreds of miles from the Pacific Ocean immediately conclude, ah, yes, an ocean-faring vessel has somehow parked itself in this landlocked sandbox?
It's a huge leap.
It sounds like the reasoning of a madman.
Well, from a purely surface-level perspective, yes, it does sound like complete insanity. But, and here's the chilling part of this legend, and the reason it has survived for over a century, Charlie's insane leap of logic was actually rooted in hard geological fact.
Wait, really?
Yes. Modern geological and topographical studies have completely validated the Cahuilla oral history. The water was real.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of that, because the idea of a massive body of water just appearing and disappearing in the Mojave sounds like, I don't know, biblical magic.
Yeah.
How does a desert suddenly become a sea?
It all comes down to the volatile hydrology of the Colorado River and the specific tectonic geography of that region. The area we are talking about contains this massive geological depression known as the Salton Sink. It sits far below sea level.
Oh, like Death Valley.
Similar concept, yeah. And since around 700 AD, the Colorado River, which is this massive, incredibly powerful force of nature, has periodically jumped its banks.
Jumped its banks.
Yeah. Rocky Mountains. The river would just completely alter its course.
Wow.
Instead of emptying south into the Gulf of California like it normally does, millions of tons of water would surge north, pouring directly into the Salton Sink.
So you basically have this apocalyptic flood of fresh water rushing into a dry basin.
A deluge of biblical proportions. And when this happened, it created a massive temporary inland sea called Lake Cahuilla.
Temporary, but how big are we talking?
We're not talking about a small pond here. We are talking about a body of water that, at its peak, was over 100 miles long, 35 miles wide, and in some places, 300 feet deep.
That is terrifying. 100 miles long in the middle of a desert.
Yes. And we know this is an absolute, undeniable fact because the remnants of that ancient shoreline are still visible in the desert today.
No way. You can actually see it.
You can literally walk through the dry, baking desert scrub and see the distinct water lines etched deep into the canyon walls. You can find massive deposits of ancient seashells just scattered in the sand.
That is so eerie.
And for the Native Americans in the area, this lake, when it existed, was their lifeblood. It provided fish, birds. It was a massive oasis in the wasteland.
Okay, so the lake is real. The Cahuilla oral history of the water is verified fact. But, I mean, a lake is not an ocean. How does a massive ocean-faring ship like a galleon get from the saltwater of the Pacific into a freshwater flood basin in the middle of a desert?
That is the terrifying crux of the theory.
Right, because they don't connect.
Well, it is believed by some geographers and historians that during these massive, once-in-a-century flood years, the swollen Colorado River could have formed a temporary, highly dangerous, but physically navigable link between this inland lake and the ocean.
Wait, really? A link to the sea?
Yes. Specifically, the Gulf of California, which historically extended much further north than it does today. A phenomenon known as a tidal bore, which is a massive wave caused by the meeting of the ocean tide and the flooding river, could push incredible amounts of water up the delta.
Oh my God. I want you to really visualize this because the horror of this scenario is just palpable.
It really is a nightmare.
Imagine you are the crew of a 17th century Spanish galleon exploring the Gulf of California. You get caught in a freak storm or one of these massive tidal bores, and your ship is just violently pushed up an overflowing river channel.
Totally at the mercy of the water.
Yeah. You ride these chaotic floodwaters for days, entirely at the mercy of the current, until suddenly the water calms. You drop anchor, you look around, and you are floating in a massive, placid inland sea, completely surrounded by towering, dry desert mountains.
You think you've survived.
Right. You survive the storm. But then the real nightmare begins.
The slow, agonizing realization of your doom. Because eventually the winter snowmelt stops, the Colorado River recedes and returns to its normal channel, emptying back into the Gulf.
Cutting you off completely.
The navigable link to the sea simply dries up and vanishes into the mud. You are trapped. And then the brutal desert sun goes to work.
Oh no.
Lake Cahuilla begins to evaporate. You are stranded on a ship watching the shoreline creep further and further away day by day.
That's psychological torture.
The water level drops. The hull of your massive ship eventually grounds itself in the mud. The water recedes completely, leaving the ship stranded, high and dry, turning into a rotting wooden skeleton in a barren wasteland.
And the crew, they can't stay on the ship.
No, the crew would have to abandon the ship and walk into the desert, almost certainly to their deaths. It is just an agonizing slow-motion disaster.
It is deeply eerie. It's literally an ocean vessel dying of thirst.
Exactly.
But for Charlie Klusker in 1847,
Wow.
as wild as this story is, and as much as his brain clings to the idea of a physical ship, he actually files it away. He pushes the Cahuilla myth to the back of his mind. Which, you know, if you are a broke prospector and you think there is a literal shipwreck full of potential treasure sitting in the desert, why do you just keep walking?
Because Charlie has severe tunnel vision at this point. He is entirely focused on the promise of California.
Right, the gold.
Well, not even the gold yet, just the promise of the land. He has endured 3 months of hell on earth to get to this promised land, and he finally arrives in Los Angeles in the spring of 1848, fully expecting immediate prosperity.
He wants the paradise he was promised.
Yes, he expects bustling markets, verdant farmland, easy wealth.
And what does he actually find? Like, what is the reality of California in early 1848?
It is a barren, muddy, desolate wilderness.
Oh, wow.
The reality shatters his expectations completely. When Charlie arrives, California is essentially empty of European settlers. The entire vast territory has a non-native population of barely 20,000 people.
That's nothing.
It's tiny. The settlement that will eventually become the thriving metropolis of San Francisco is a muddy little outpost with fewer than 1,000 residents.
That's mud and tents.
Mostly, yeah. Most of the people there are just ranching cattle on massive, isolated tracts of land. It is absolutely nothing like the land of milk and honey he envisioned. There is no infrastructure, no booming economy, and certainly no easy wealth lying on the ground.
So he walks 2,000 miles, risks frostbite, starvation, and ambush, and he gets there, and it's just like a few cows and dirt.
Pretty much.
The psychological deflation must have been crushing. So, frustrated and impatient, after just 2 weeks in California, he makes a fateful decision. He packs his bags, gives up on the California dream, and leaves for Texas.
And in doing so, he commits what might be the greatest geographical blunder in American history.
The timing is just tragic.
It is, because he leaves in early 1848. The exact dates are critical here. Just as Charlie Klusker is walking out of California in disgust, James W. Marshall discovers gold flakes in the water channel below Sutter's Mill. The California gold rush begins, literally as he's walking away.
That is physically painful to hear. To put this in modern terms, it's like liquidating all your tech stock the day before the dot-com boom started.
Exactly.
He had the ultimate early adopter advantage. He was perfectly positioned on the ground before anyone else in the world knew about the gold. And he just walked away from it.
It is the ultimate missed opportunity, and it haunts him. Because news of the gold discovery eventually leaks out, and suddenly gold fever infects the entire globe.
And it really was a fever.
Oh, it wasn't just an economic event. It was a psychological plague. There is a sheer, unadulterated mania to get to California. Every single second counts.
People were leaving their whole lives behind.
Abandoning their families, their jobs, their farms. You have people pouring in from China, Europe, Australia, and South America. In 1849 alone, more than 50,000 desperate people crossed the North American continent. It is one of the largest mass migrations in human history.
And where is Charlie Klusker? Well, the surface gold is literally being scooped up by the handful.
He's 1,600 miles away in Texas, completely oblivious until it's too late.
When he finally hears the news, he is right back where he started, alongside everyone else who was late to the party. He has lost all his advantage.
All of it.
You can just imagine the suffocating anxiety he felt. He has to turn around and do the exact same brutal 2,000-mile journey all over again. But this time, it's not an isolated trek.
Yeah.
Every day he's walking, he is psychologically tormented by the thought of thousands of other men digging up his gold.
Yes. His second journey is entirely different. He isn't alone anymore. He is traveling on what the historical sources describe as a superhighway of desperate, greedy, often violent people, all making the same frantic dash.
It's a superhighway of wagons.
And the trail is just littered with the carcasses of dead draft animals and abandoned wagons. And when he finally gets back to California, the quiet cattle ranching territory he left is gone.
Right, it's totally transformed.
It is transformed into this bustling, anarchic, explosive center of the world, just choked with prospectors.
So he gets back, he stakes his claim. And initially, according to the sources, Charlie is incredibly lucky. He actually finds gold early on.
He does.
The euphoria he must have felt. After all that failure, the blisters, the missed timing, the sheer terror of the trail, he finally pulls physical wealth out of the dirt.
It is an absolute intoxicating high. But, you know, like a gambler who wins massive on their first hand, it sets him up for a much harder, more devastating fall.
Because it doesn't last.
No. Because the easy pickings, the gold sitting right on the surface of the riverbeds, dry up very quickly. We really need to unpack the actual economics of the gold rush, because the mythology tells us the miners got rich.
That's the story we all hear.
The reality was vastly different. The people who actually made the generational wealth were rarely the men swinging the pickaxes. It was the merchants, the people who mined the miners.
It's the classic business axiom, right? In a gold rush, don't dig for gold, sell the shovels. If you are a broke miner who just walked 2,000 miles, you arrive with nothing. You need food, a tent, a pan, a shovel, warm clothes. And if you're the only merchant selling beans and pickaxes to 50,000 desperate, starving men in an isolated mountain camp, you dictate reality. You set the price.
Precisely. And the price gouging was astronomical. A single egg could cost the equivalent of $20 in today's money.
$20 for one egg.
A pair of boots could cost a week's worth of gold dust. And to get to the remaining gold that was buried deep in the quartz, Charlie would need heavy industrial mining equipment, which he absolutely could not afford.
He's priced out of his own dream.
Completely. The competition became fierce, corporate, and cutthroat. Every passing year, his chances of striking it rich plummeted. By 1855, the romantic era of the California gold rush is essentially over.
The corporations took over.
Exactly. The corporations have moved in. After 6 years of backbreaking, soul-crushing labor, living in squalor and mud, Charlie has failed to make his fortune. He is broke, aging, and desperate.
So he's just sitting there stewing in this crushing bitterness, watching the merchants build mansions in San Francisco while he has nothing.
It would drive anyone crazy.
Right. But a prospector's mind is a very specific type of machinery. It never stops seeking the next strike. In 1862, news breaks of new gold deposits in neighboring Arizona.
And off he goes.
Exactly. Charlie packs up and heads south again. And this specific route takes him right back across the arid lands of the Cahuilla tribe.
And that is when the memory of the bird with the white wings comes rushing back. The phantom ship in the desert.
It had been years.
It had, but he remembers the oral history. He is too focused on Arizona gold to actively pursue it right then, though. Fast forward 8 more agonizing years to September 1870.
Okay.
Charlie is back in Southern California in the town of San Bernardino. He is still hunting for gold, still scraping by, and he's an old man by the standards of the era. He picks up a copy of his local newspaper, the San Bernardino Guardian, and there, this small, sensational article catches his eye and changes everything.
The sources outline exactly what this article claimed, and if you are Charlie Klusker, it is like reading a direct message from the universe.
It really is.
The article claims that a party of American travelers has stumbled upon a massive shipwreck embedded deep in the desert sands. The Cahuilla myth is suddenly in print. It's no longer a campfire story. It is reported news.
And the article provides stunningly specific details. It states that nearly 1/3 of the massive hull is plainly visible above the shifting dunes.
Oh, wow.
It specifically describes the stump of a heavy bowsprit and perfectly preserved timbers made of teak wood, just baked hard by the sun.
So he is seeing dollar signs. Because a ship that large in a desert isn't a fishing boat, it's a cargo vessel.
Yes, and the speculation surrounding this article in the town is completely wild. Rumors start swirling that it is a lost Spanish galleon, specifically a ship from a legendary 1610 expedition authorized by King Philip III of Spain.
What were they looking for?
That expedition was sent to the Gulf of California for pearl harvesting.
Ah, pearls.
The lore of the Spanish pearling fleets was a massive part of the historical consciousness in California. The Gulf of California was famous for producing enormous, incredibly valuable black pearls.
So the idea is that this ship was swept up there.
Right. If a galleon full of Spanish silver, gold crucifixes, and chests of black pearls was pushed up into Lake Cahuilla by a freak flood and stranded, whoever found it would possess unimaginable wealth.
And the rumors just take off.
The legends mutate daily. Some think it's a Viking nar blown off course centuries ago. Others think it's a lost British privateer. But the core promise is always the same. Immense treasure, just sitting there in the sand waiting to be claimed.
But the Mojave is massive.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just wander out and look for it. Does the article say exactly where this ship is located?
It actually gives incredibly precise coordinates, which is what lights the fire under Charlie. It states that the ship lies just under 70 miles away, exactly 40 miles north of the San Bernardino-Fort Yuma Road, and 30 miles west of Dos Palos.
I mean, that is literally a treasure map printed in a daily newspaper for anyone with $1 to read.
Exactly.
And Charlie knows that because it is in print, the clock is ticking. He has fierce competition now. He has to get there first. Armed with these coordinates and fueled by decades of financial desperation, missed opportunities, and just crushing disappointment, Charlie prepares to head out.
He's all in.
He is. But we really need to pause and set the scene here. Walking into the heart of the Mojave Desert in 1870 is not a camping trip.
Not at all.
It is basically walking onto the surface of an alien, hostile planet.
It is an environment completely engineered to kill human beings. As you described earlier, the cinematic dread of the Mojave is very real. Temperatures routinely hit 120, 125 degrees.
Which is lethal.
Yes, the threat of predators, coyotes, wolves, venomous rattlesnakes is constant. But the most terrifying predator is the geography itself. If you make a single navigational mistake, if your wagon axle breaks, if a horse breaks a leg, you don't just have a bad day, you die a slow, horrific death.
And you have to carry everything.
You have to carry every single pound of food you need to survive. Dry goods, jerky, hardtack. But above all, you need water.
Right.
Water sources in the deep desert are not things you can reliably reach in a single day's walk. They are hundreds of miles apart. If you or your draft animals run out, you are stranded in an oven.
So Charlie knows this. He's an experienced frontiersman. He gathers a crew because going alone is guaranteed suicide. On October 1st, 1870, Charlie and his team set out on their first expedition.
Yes.
Initially, they follow known trails, but to get to these coordinates, they soon have to step off the map into completely uncharted territory. Which brings up a massive technical question. How do you navigate a featureless, shifting sea of sand in 1870? There's no GPS. There are no paved roads.
You rely on a highly dangerous, error-prone method called dead reckoning.
Dead reckoning.
Yes. In a landscape where the ground itself changes shape with the wind, you have to look for distant, static visual landmarks. A specific jagged rock formation, a distant mountain peak. You mathematically calculate your speed, the time elapsed, and your compass heading relative to that static point.
So you're basically doing math while baking in the sun.
Right. You mentally map your turns based on those distant objects. But the Mojave is notoriously deceptive. It plays tricks on the human eye. Distances are an optical illusion.
Because of the heat?
The air is so incredibly clear, devoid of humidity, that a mountain peak that looks like it's 2 miles away can actually be 40 miles away. And the intense heat radiating off the desert floor creates a hazy distortion that just ruins your depth perception.
But according to the expedition logs, despite this sensory deprivation chamber of a landscape, Charlie feels they are getting close. After days of struggling through the deep sand, he believes they are just 10 miles away from the target coordinates.
He's so close.
He thinks they can reach the ship by nightfall. The treasure is within his grasp. But then, the desert reminds them who is in charge.
The horror strikes out of nowhere. Charlie is walking, leading his horse, when he looks down and notices something deeply unsettling. The deep tracks he is leaving in the dry sand are starting to fill up from the bottom with dark, muddy water.
Wait, water welling up under the sand in a desert that gets almost zero rain? It sounds like a trap.
It is a geological trap. He has wandered over a subterranean aquifer, or a hidden desert spring. The surface crust of the sand is bone dry, but inches below, it is a saturated slurry.
Oh, no.
In an instant, the crust gives way, and he realizes he is standing in quicksand.
That is horrifying.
It is a moment of pure cinematic terror. He is miles from nowhere, the silence is deafening, and suddenly the ground itself opens up and tries to swallow him whole. His horse, which weighs 1,000 pounds, immediately begins sinking deep into the abrasive sand.
The panic of an animal in that situation is terrifying.
The sources describe a horrific, visceral scene. The horse is thrashing wildly, screaming in pure panic, fighting for its life. The wet sand is like liquid sandpaper.
Liquid sandpaper.
As the massive animal violently kicks and struggles to pull its legs out of the suction, the abrasive force is so extreme that it literally rips the hide and hair right off the horse's legs, leaving them bloody and raw.
Oh my God. That is absolute nightmare fuel. The sheer noise of a screaming horse echoing in the dead, empty silence of the Mojave.
It's awful.
Charlie barely manages to pull the bleeding horse out of the muck and escape the sinkhole. He is shaken to his core. He realizes that pushing forward through this hidden minefield of quicksand is suicide.
He has to turn back.
Yeah, he is forced to turn around and endure the humiliating, agonizing retreat all the way back to San Bernardino, totally empty-handed.
But the prospector mentality is an ironclad pathology. Failure is just a temporary delay for him.
Right.
He plans his next expedition immediately, even though his crew is deeply traumatized and highly reluctant to go back into that meat grinder. On November 5th, 1870, which is just over a month later, Charlie heads out again.
He's relentless.
He is. And this time, he tries to adapt to the environment. He brings heavy wooden planks in the wagon to lay out across the quicksand if they encounter it again.
Okay, adapting to the terrain, that's smart. But he is so hyperfixated on solving the quicksand problem that he takes his eye off the most fundamental rule of desert survival. He makes a catastrophic logistical error.
A deadly one. He miscalculates his load weight and forgets to bring enough of the absolute basics. First, his food supplies run out much faster than anticipated.
And there's nothing to eat out there.
Absolutely nothing. In that specific sector of the deep desert floor, there is absolutely nothing to forage or hunt. No game, no vegetation. You might get incredibly lucky and manage to kill and eat a rattlesnake, but otherwise, you starve.
So they're starving.
Yes. Despite his stomach eating itself, his obsession drives him forward. But then, the ultimate disaster strikes. The one thing you cannot survive. He runs out of water.
Oh, God. Running out of water in the Mojave is a death sentence, and he is still 30 miles away from the ship's reported location. He is completely isolated.
It's the worst-case scenario.
I want to talk about the physical reality of what happens next, because we use the word dehydration casually, like it just means you're really thirsty. But in 110-degree heat, it is a systemic, gruesome, biological shutdown.
It is physiological torture.
Tell me what's happening inside his body.
If you are listening to this, imagine being in an oven. Your body is desperately sweating to cool your core temperature, rapidly depleting your internal fluid volume. Within hours, your blood literally thickens.
It thickens.
It becomes like sludge. Your heart has to pump furiously, working overtime just to push this thick, viscous fluid through your veins, leading to tremendous, blinding, pounding headaches that feel like your skull is fracturing.
That sounds excruciating.
It is. Your muscles, starved of electrolytes, begin to cramp and seize up intensely. Your tongue swells, filling your mouth. You lose your sense of balance and direction. Your vision begins to diminish, narrowing into a blurry tunnel.
And mentally.
Eventually, your brain synapses start misfiring, and you lose the ability to speak coherently.
So he is literally baking alive in his own skin. His brain is shutting down. But he keeps walking.
He keeps stumbling forward because the obsession is stronger than the instinct for self-preservation. And as he is staggering through this hazy delirium, looking at the ground, he spots something that sends a shockwave through his dying nervous system.
What does he see?
Scattered across the baking desert floor are seashells.
Proof of the ancient sea. The remnants of Lake Cahuilla.
Exactly. To Charlie, it is absolute confirmation. The Native American myth was real. The water was here. Therefore, the ship must be here.
Wow.
But physically, his body is at the absolute limit. He realizes, in a moment of agonizing clarity, that if he takes another step forward, he will die in the sand.
He knows he's done.
Utterly dejected, his vision swimming, he takes one last, desperate look around the hazy horizon. He pulls out his spyglass, and that is when he sees it.
Holy Grail.
He looks through the brass telescope, his eye pressed against the hot metal, and he is absolutely convinced that he sees the massive, unmistakable 250-foot wooden mast of a Spanish galleon rising majestically out of the shimmering sand dunes in the distance.
This is the crux of the entire mystery. This specific moment. We have to view this with intense skepticism, right? Can we trust the testimony of a man whose brain is literally shutting down from acute heat stroke? The blood is thick sludge in his veins. His vision is failing. He has a blinding headache. He is desperate, and he wants to see a ship more than anything in the world. Is this a hallucination born of sheer biological desperation, or did he actually see a physical object?
That is the perfect question, and to answer it, we have to do a scientific breakdown of desert optical illusions because there is a very distinct scientific difference between a hallucination and a mirage. They are not the same thing.
Right. A hallucination is a psychological event. It's entirely internal. It's your brain misfiring and projecting an image that does not exist anywhere in the physical world.
Exactly. A hallucination is in your head, but a mirage is a real, physical, measurable, optical phenomenon.
Okay, explain how that works.
It happens when extreme differences in air temperature, specifically, a layer of incredibly hot air sitting directly on the desert floor beneath a layer of cooler air-caused light rays, to bend and refract. The desert is essentially acting like a massive, distorted mirror, bending the light and creating a false, shimmering image of a distant object.
So a mirage is projecting a real object from far away, but heavily distorting its shape.
Yes, the desert is projecting a refracted blob of light. However, how your dying, desperate brain interprets that blurry, vertical, shimmering shape depends entirely on what you expect or want to see.
Pareidolia, right?
Exactly. A psychological phenomenon called pareidolia plays a massive role here. The human tendency to see recognizable shapes in random patterns, like seeing faces in the clouds or a figure in the shadows.
So Charlie looks through his telescope. The desert optics project a shimmering, distorted vertical shape. Maybe it's a weirdly shaped rock spire, or, I don't know, a yucca tree distorted by the heat haze miles away, and his desperate, gold-fevered, heat-addled brain snaps the image into focus and says, that is a 250-foot mast of a galleon.
Precisely. The environment provides the distorted canvas, and his obsession paints the picture. But Charlie doesn't believe for a second it's a trick of the light. He is adamant.
He believes it entirely.
When he miraculously manages to stumble back to civilization, drinking from muddy seeps to survive, he is a walking skeleton. But when the townspeople ask him, Charlie, you were dying of thirst, are you sure it wasn't a mirage? He insists without a shadow of a doubt that he saw the physical ship.
He's not backing down.
No, he claims his telescope was high quality, the air was clear, and he knows exactly what he saw.
So he literally comes back from the dead, marches into town, and announces to everyone that he found the lost ship of the Mojave.
And overnight, he becomes an absolute rock star. The quiet town of San Bernardino goes completely crazy. He is a local celebrity. The story explodes out of the local borders.
But fame is a beast that requires constant fuel. What happens next? How does this escalate?
The media circus begins, and this is where the story shifts from a tale of survival into a fascinating study of 19th century media economics.
Oh, this is where Tolbert comes in.
Right. Joshua Tolbert, the ambitious editor of the San Bernardino Guardian, the paper that originally printed the coordinates, realizes his exclusive local hero is about to be snatched up by much bigger fish.
The national papers.
Yes, because the Alta California, which is the premier, highest circulation, most powerful newspaper in the state at the time, sends reporters to interview Charlie. The story goes national.
Wow.
Suddenly, major newspapers in New York, Cincinnati, Kansas, and New Orleans are all running sensational front-page stories about the lost ship of the Mojave, complete with illustrations of Spanish galleons in the sand.
It's the 19th century equivalent of a story going violently viral. And Tolbert is sitting in his small office, watching his exclusive local scoop get aggregated and monetized by every major publisher in the country.
He is losing control of the narrative. Tolbert's paper, The Galleon, was only founded in 1867. It's a relatively new, struggling publication. He needs this massive story to make his newspaper's name and secure its financial future.
So what does he do?
He decides he has to take drastic action. He insists on embedding himself in Charlie's next guaranteed-to-succeed expedition.
The classic embedded journalist trope.
That.
But I'm guessing Charlie, who is now a national celebrity, doesn't just let a newspaper editor tag along for free.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
It is highly likely, based on the scale of the operation, that Tolbert and his wealthy backers were paying Charlie handsomely for exclusive first-hand access.
They funded it.
Because suddenly, Charlie is incredibly well-funded. For this third attempt, leaving on November 30th, 1870, they aren't messing around with a single horse and a few canteens. They launch a massive militarized operation.
How big?
They have a huge, heavy wagon pulled by multiple draft animals. They bring massive wooden barrels containing 108 gallons of fresh water.
108 gallons?
Yes. They have enough cured meat, beans, and flour for 2 full months in the deep desert. Charlie is not leaving anything to chance.
It sounds like an army mobilizing for a siege.
It absolutely was. To guarantee they don't run out of water, Charlie takes yet another new route, approaching the target area from a rare, reliable desert water source called Carrizo Creek.
Okay, smart.
But the terrain in this specific sector is an absolute nightmare.
Worse than the quicksand that almost swallowed his horse.
In a different, much more psychologically exhausting way, it is a chaotic, jagged landscape of massive rolling sandhills, sheer mountains, and deep, impassable depressions. Progress is agonizingly slow.
Oh, slow.
They are dragging this incredibly heavy wagon through deep, loose sand, averaging maybe 10 to 15 miles a day of back-breaking labor. And worse, Charlie realizes that he can no longer navigate by dead reckoning.
Wait, why not? The mountains haven't moved.
The mountains haven't, but the landmarks he relied on in the dunes are gone. The Mojave is described by the sources here as a living, breathing thing.
What do you mean?
The aeolian processes, the wind moving the sand, are so fierce and relentless out there that a 40-foot-tall sand berm can literally vanish overnight. It's
Wow.
millions of grains relocated to a completely different location.
A 40-foot mountain of sand just disappears.
Yes. What is a towering mountain of sand blocking your path today is a flat, wind-scoured valley tomorrow. The map is constantly erasing and redrawing itself.
That is deeply unsettling. The environment is actively gaslighting you. It's like trying to navigate a ship on a stormy ocean, where the massive waves keep changing the topography. But here, the waves are made of crushed rock.
Which is incredibly taxing on the human mind. And for Joshua Tolbert, the city-dwelling newspaper editor, the harsh, brutal reality of the desert sets in very quickly.
He's not built for this.
No. He expected Charlie to march confidently out there, point a finger at the galleon, grab a handful of black pearls and a gold crucifix to prove it, and go home a week later to print the story of the century.
Right, an easy scoop.
But days of dragging a wagon through the heat turn into weeks. Tolbert is miserable, sunburned, exhausted, and he starts watching Charlie very, very closely. And he notices something highly suspicious about their famous guide.
Okay, here is where we get into a theory that completely recontextualizes this entire historical saga. What does Tolbert see that makes him suspicious?
Tolbert notices that Charlie, the man who supposedly knows exactly where a treasure ship is located, is in absolutely no hurry to get there.
That is weird.
If you know exactly where a galleon full of Spanish silver is sitting, you march in a straight, determined line toward those coordinates. But Charlie isn't doing that.
What is he doing?
He is meandering. Every single day, he heads out from camp in a completely different direction. He is searching a broader and broader area, and crucially, he is looking down at the ground, examining the dirt and the rocks.
He is not looking off into the distance at the horizon, searching for a 250-foot mass.
Exactly. Tolbert realizes this is not the behavior of a man hunting for a massive visual anomaly like a shipwreck. He starts to suspect that Charlie is looking for something much smaller and much closer to his heart.
Gold.
Gold.
So let's unpack the implications of this. You're saying this entire legendary quest could be a massive, orchestrated con, like a 19th century fraudulent Kickstarter campaign.
It is a very strong, very cynical, and highly plausible possibility. Think about Charlie's core economic problem. He is a broke, aging prospector.
Right.
The gold rush is long over. The easy surface gold is gone. To find new gold veins in the hostile desert now, you need time. And time in the desert requires massive amounts of incredibly expensive supplies. Water, food, wagons, strong draft animals.
Which, as a broke miner, he absolutely cannot afford.
Right. If Charlie walks into a bank or goes to a wealthy newspaper editor and says, "Please fund my random open-ended desert prospecting trip. I have zero proof I'll find anything, but I need 108 gallons of water and 2 months of food," the investor laughs in his face and throws him out.
It wouldn't give him a dime.
But if he walks in and claims, with the conviction of a man who nearly died for it, that he is hunting the legendary lost ship of the Mojave, a Spanish galleon overflowing with black pearls.
It's a totally different pitch. Suddenly, he's a romantic hero on a quest. The narrative is irresistible. The newspapers will happily fund him for the exclusive rights. Investors will throw money at him for a share of the treasure.
This is the perfect bait.
Tolbert, the editor, will literally buy a massive wagon and stockpile 108 gallons of water just to tag along and write the story. It's a Kickstarter where he's promising venture capitalists a Spanish galleon, knowing full well the product doesn't exist.
Exactly. For Charlie Klusker, the ship legend may have simply been the ultimate means to an end. It was the shiny lure he used to get himself fully subsidized, rent-free time in the desert so he could do his actual job, prospect for gold.
That is wild.
He used their money to fund his survival while he searched the rocks. If this is true, it was a brilliant, highly calculated, and incredibly dangerous grift, considering he was dragging civilians into a death trap.
Wow. He weaponized a local myth to fund his day job. That is simultaneously a stroke of absolute genius and deeply sociopathic. And Colbert, sitting in the baking sun, puts the pieces together.
Tolbert figures it out. After 20 agonizing, blistering days of watching Charlie look at dirt and rocks instead of the horizon, Tolbert realizes he's been had. He quits.
He just leaves.
He abandons the expedition in disgust and heads back to civilization to run his newspaper, likely humiliated that he fell for the oldest trick in the prospector's handbook.
Does Charlie go back with him? Or does he drop the act and stay out there?
Oh, Charlie stays out there. Why wouldn't he? He has a fully stocked wagon, massive barrels of water, and weeks of supplies paid for by the newspaper.
Right, he's got what he wanted.
He stays out in the desert for another 3 full weeks, meticulously looking for gold veins. But ultimately, the desert yields nothing. He returns to San Bernardino empty-handed, no gold, and certainly no Spanish galleon.
And I'm guessing the media drops him instantly.
Completely. Failures do not sell newspapers. The press abandons him overnight. The national spotlight moves on to the next sensation.
So he just fades away.
Charlie is gutted, aging, and still broke. He finally gives up the obsessive quest for the ship. He lives a long, remarkably quiet life after that, dying in 1915 at the incredible age of 105.
105, wow.
Yes. A local tribute printed in the paper upon his death simply referred to him as a typical prospector and miner, a man who possessed boundless wealth and prospect in his mind's eye, but rarely ever held it in his hand.
But the truly wild, fascinating part of this story is that even though Charlie Klusker gave up and faded into obscurity, the myth he popularized absolutely refused to die. Charlie's specific search ended in the 1870s, but the legend of the lost ship of the Mojave was only just getting started. It took on a life of its own.
It really did. The 20th century saw an absolute explosion of reported sightings. This myth outlived Charlie by generations, becoming deeply embedded in the folklore of the American Southwest.
People just kept seeing it.
Over the next several decades, numerous explorers, lost hikers, and prospectors claimed to have stumbled upon the rotting hull of the ship. We have highly documented recorded sightings making the news in 1892, 1907, 1933, and as late as 1944.
What's truly fascinating from a sociological standpoint is how the lore mutates over time. It's like a game of historical telephone played over a century.
Oh, the details change constantly.
Right. It starts as a Native American bird with white wings, then it becomes a Spanish galleon full of black pearls. But then, in later sightings, eyewitnesses describe something entirely different. Some claim they saw a Viking longboat, complete with carved dragon heads.
Yes. How a Viking nar designed for the freezing North Atlantic supposedly navigated its way into a Southern California desert lake is a geographical and historical question no one can answer.
It makes no sense.
None at all. But the lore doesn't stop there. Other frantic eyewitnesses described finding a shipwreck of ancient appearance tucked deep into a shaded box canyon, featuring weird, inexplicable round metal discs on its sides.
Round metal discs? Are they implying some kind of ancient submarine? Or a Jules Verne-style steampunk vessel buried in the sand?
The imagination of the public runs completely wild, and the treasure rumors escalate alongside the fantastical descriptions. Suddenly, local residents in small desert towns start claiming in hushed tones that they actually possess physical artifacts looted from the wreck.
Like what?
Gold crucifixes, ancient coins, and those famous, priceless black pearls.
But if we look at the hard evidence, there is a massive, glaring red flag in absolutely all of these historical accounts. Every single person who claims to have found the ship sees it exactly once. Nobody in the history of this legend has ever been able to find it twice.
That is the ultimate catch. It is the defining, maddening characteristic of this legend. An explorer or a lost hiker spots the ship. They are overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the discovery.
Sure.
They realize they don't have the heavy excavation tools, the water, or the manpower to dig a 250-foot galleon out of the sand. So they carefully note their location, retreat to civilization for supplies and a crew, and when they return to the exact same spot, it is completely gone.
And they always blame the shifting sands.
Exactly. They claim a massive sandstorm blew through and buried it again. But the harsh, undeniable reality that we have to confront is that there is absolutely zero official, verified physical evidence of this ship.
Nothing at all.
No museum on Earth has a piece of teak wood authenticated to have been sitting in the Mojave for 3 centuries. No one has ever presented these legendary black pearls to a reputable appraiser.
Although I do love that there is a very funny, surreal, modern twist to this entire saga. Some people who claim to have seen a ship in the desert recently aren't actually lying, right?
That's true. In a very bizarre modern update to the myth, some contemporary sightings of a desert ship near the town of Baker, California are actually real.
But it's not a galleon.
No, these confused motorists aren't seeing a Spanish galleon or a Viking longboat. They are seeing an actual 20th century fishing boat that an eccentric local dragged out into the deep desert and placed there as a massive art installation.
So the mirage actually became a physical reality, just in the most ironic way possible. But looking at the grand sweeping scope of this entire story, from the Cahuilla tribe's beautiful oral history of the bird with white wings, to Charlie Klusker's frantic, death-defying expeditions, to the 20th century sightings of Viking ships and steampunk submarines, we have to ask, why do we want this to be true so badly? Why does this specific legend endure?
I think it comes down to the deep psychology of the unknown and the romance of hidden things. The desert is a harsh, brutal, often deeply monotonous environment. It visually represents death, emptiness, and finality.
It's just a blank slate.
Right. But the idea that hidden within that vast, barren wasteland is a pocket of unimaginable wealth, ancient history, and profound mystery. It is a powerful, intoxicating psychological antidote to the mundane reality of everyday life.
We want to believe in magic.
We desperately want to believe that the world is still capable of surprising us, that every corner of the map hasn't been monetized and paved over, that there are still impossible magical things left to be found if you just look over the next dune.
It's the ultimate escape from the ordinary. If you are listening to this right now, think about your own life. How often do you want to believe a fantastic, incredible story just because the alternative, the boring, harsh, logical reality, is simply too depressing to accept?
It's human nature.
Charlie Klusker may have been a visionary who saw the truth of the ancient Lake Cahuilla before modern science caught up. He may have been a tragic victim of a heat-induced mirage, a man whose brain betrayed him. Or he may have been a brilliant, highly cynical con artist who tricked the 19th century media into paying for his camping trips. But whatever he was, he successfully tapped into a fundamental, universal human desire for wonder. He made people look at a dead, terrifying desert and see an ocean of possibility.
And if we connect this entire saga back to the nature of the environment itself, it leaves us with one final, deeply unsettling thought to mull over.
What's that?
We tend to think of the desert as a static, unchanging, dead place. A dusty museum of dry sand and bleached bones. But as Charlie Klusker learned the hard way when he tried to navigate it, if 40-foot dunes can move overnight, violently erasing landmarks and swallowing the entire landscape in darkness, perhaps the Mojave isn't a desert at all.
What do you mean by that?
Perhaps it is just a different kind of ocean. A slow, grinding, terrifying sea made of crushed rock, moving in relentless currents of wind instead of water. One that occasionally spits out the ghostly remnants of the past. A seashell, a myth, a mirage of a galleon just to taunt us before swallowing them whole again in the dark.
Wow.
And if that is true, if the desert is a slow-moving sea, you have to wonder, what else might be buried just a few feet beneath the sand waiting for the wind to shift?